Eastern sector clear, beams sweeping normally. Roger that, continue monitoring.
Night settles over the western Pacific. Far above the clouds, an American reconnaissance satellite quietly scans the ocean below. Its sensors track movement across thousands of kilometers of dark water. On the screen inside a command center in the United States, small symbols begin to appear. Several warships have changed course. They are part of a large Chinese naval formation moving through waters near Taiwan. Destroyers, frigates, amphibious assault ships. Hundreds of miles away, a U.S. aircraft carrier strike group receives updated intelligence. Fighter jets sit ready on the flight deck. Radar systems rotate slowly against the night sky. At the same moment, thousands of kilometers to the west, NATO radar stations in Eastern Europe detect Russian military aircraft conducting exercises near Alliance airspace. In another part of the world, cybersecurity analysts work through the night to contain a sophisticated attack targeting critical infrastructure. None of these events begins with a declaration of war. No speeches, no formal announcements. Yet across multiple regions of the world, military forces are moving, alliances are tightening, and tensions are rising. Some analysts believe these events represent isolated crises. Others see something more significant, a gradual shift in the global balance of power that could shape the most dangerous era of international rivalry since the Cold War. And it raises a difficult question. Are these simply geopolitical tensions, or early signs of a much larger global confrontation? For a brief moment in modern history, it appeared that large-scale rivalry between global powers had ended. When the Cold War concluded in 1991, the geopolitical landscape changed dramatically. The collapse of the Soviet Union left the United States as the world's dominant military and economic power. Many analysts believe the international system had entered a new era, one defined less by confrontation and more by cooperation. Through the 1990s and early 2000s, global trade expanded rapidly. International institutions strengthened. Military conflicts continued, but they were largely regional rather than systemic. Yet beneath the surface, deeper structural shifts were already unfolding. One of the most significant developments was the gradual expansion of North Atlantic Treaty Organization, commonly known as NATO. Originally formed in 1949 as a defensive alliance against Soviet influence in Europe, NATO began admitting new members from Eastern Europe after the Cold War ended. Countries that had once been part of the Soviet sphere, Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic, joined the alliance in 1999. Over the next decade, additional states, including the Baltic nations, followed. For many Western governments, this expansion represented the spread of democratic security partnerships across Europe. But from Moscow's perspective, the situation looked very different. Russian leaders increasingly viewed NATO's presence near their borders as a strategic threat. Throughout the early 2000s, Russian officials repeatedly warned that further expansion could destabilize the regional balance of power. These tensions became more visible in 2008. That year, war erupted between Russia and Georgia over the regions of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. The brief conflict lasted only 5 days, but carried broader implications. For the first time since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russian forces had engaged directly in a conventional conflict with a neighboring state seeking closer ties with Western institutions. 6 years later, another turning point occurred. In 2014, following political upheaval in Ukraine, Russian forces moved into the Crimean Peninsula. Within weeks, Moscow formally annexed the territory in what became known as the annexation of Crimea. The move shocked much of the international community. Western governments imposed economic sanctions, while NATO began reinforcing its military presence across Eastern Europe. Tensions that have been building quietly for years were now visible on the global stage. But the transformation of the international system was not happening in Europe alone. At the same time, another major power was rising rapidly in Asia. Over the past 3 decades, China experienced one of the fastest economic expansions in modern history. Massive industrial growth, technological development, and infrastructure investment transformed the country into the world's second-largest economy. With economic growth came increasing military capability. The People's Liberation Army began undergoing one of the most extensive modernization programs in modern military history. New aircraft carriers, advanced missile systems, cyber warfare units, and space capabilities became central components of China's long-term strategic planning. Chinese leaders often describe this transformation as a peaceful national rejuvenation. However, in Washington and many allied capitals, the rapid expansion of Chinese power raised concerns about strategic competition. The rivalry between the United States and China now influences global trade, technology policy, military planning, and diplomatic alliances. Meanwhile, Russia continued to pursue its own geopolitical objectives. These tensions reached a new level in 2022 when Russian forces launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, initiating the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The conflict quickly became the largest war in Europe since the Second World War. Western nations responded with extensive economic sanctions, large-scale military aid to Ukraine, and increased NATO deployments across Eastern Europe. The war also triggered a broader shift in global security thinking. Countries that had long maintained neutral defense policies began reconsidering their positions. Military budgets across Europe increased sharply. NATO accelerated cooperation among its member states. The conflict demonstrated that large-scale conventional warfare between states had not disappeared from the international system. Instead, it had returned, and it was unfolding in a world where military technology, economic interdependence, and nuclear deterrence make global stability more fragile than it might appear. Across continents, governments are now preparing for a future defined less by partnership and more by strategic competition. And as this rivalry intensifies, the number of regions where tensions could ignite into crisis continues to grow, a development that leads directly to the next stage of the story: the rapid emergence of a new global arms race. Across the world, military planners are preparing for a future that looks increasingly uncertain. Defense budgets are rising. New weapons are being tested. Alliances are expanding. According to recent reports from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, global military spending has reached its highest level since the end of the Cold War. Governments across multiple continents are investing heavily in advanced military technology, signaling a shift toward renewed strategic competition. At the center of this trend is the growing rivalry between the United States and China. For decades, the United States maintained unmatched global military reach. Its network of alliances, overseas bases, and advanced technologies allowed American forces to operate across nearly every region of the world. But China's rapid modernization is gradually altering that balance. The Chinese Navy, officially known as the People's Liberation Army Navy, has expanded dramatically in recent years. New destroyers, submarines, and aircraft carriers have entered service, transforming China into one of the world's largest naval powers. Chinese military planners are also investing heavily in missile technology. Among the most discussed developments are anti-ship ballistic missiles designed to target large naval vessels, including aircraft carriers operating in the Western Pacific. These systems are intended to make it more difficult for foreign naval forces to operate close to China's coastline. At the same time, China continues to develop advanced cyber warfare capabilities, artificial intelligence applications for military planning, and sophisticated satellite networks used for navigation, reconnaissance, and communication. While these developments reshape the strategic balance in Asia, Russia has focused on a different set of capabilities. Russian military doctrine places significant emphasis on strategic deterrence. One area receiving particular attention is hypersonic weaponry. These missiles travel at speeds exceeding 5 times the speed of sound and can maneuver unpredictably during flight, making them difficult for existing missile defense systems to intercept. Russia has tested several such systems, including the Kh-47M-2 Kinzhal hypersonic missile and the Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle, both designed to penetrate advanced defensive shields. At the same time, nuclear arsenals remain a central component of strategic stability. The United States, Russia, and China collectively possess thousands of nuclear warheads. Although international arms control agreements have reduced the size of these arsenals since the Cold War, modernization programs are now underway across all 3 countries. These upgrades include new missile delivery systems, advanced submarines, and improved command and control infrastructure. Beyond the major powers, other countries are also expanding their military capabilities. India is increasing defense spending while modernizing its air and naval forces. North Korea continues to test ballistic missiles and expand its nuclear program. Meanwhile, tensions surrounding Iran and its nuclear ambitions remain a persistent concern in the Middle East. New forms of warfare are also emerging. Autonomous drones are becoming increasingly common on modern battlefields. Artificial intelligence systems are being integrated into surveillance networks and targeting systems. Military satellites now play a critical role in communication, navigation, and early warning systems. In addition, cyber warfare has evolved into a major strategic tool. State-sponsored hacking operations have targeted power grids, financial institutions, and government infrastructure across multiple countries. These attacks often occur quietly, without public acknowledgement, yet their potential impact on modern societies can be enormous. Taken together, these developments point toward a broader transformation of global security. The world is not simply witnessing isolated military improvements. It is experiencing the early stages of a technological arms race, one that spans land, sea, air, cyberspace, and even outer space. And history suggests that arms races rarely occur in isolation. They tend to unfold alongside rising political tensions and regional disputes. Across the globe, several of these disputes have already emerged as potential flashpoints, places where competing powers, strategic interests, and military forces intersect in ways that could trigger a larger crisis. In the 21st century, the center of global economic activity has increasingly shifted toward the Indo-Pacific. It is also where some of the world's most sensitive geopolitical fault lines exist. Several regions in Asia now represent potential flashpoints, places where military forces, political tensions, and strategic interests intersect in ways that could escalate rapidly. One of the most closely watched of these regions is the Taiwan Strait. The island of Taiwan sits roughly 160 kilometers off the southeastern coast of China. For decades, the status of Taiwan has been one of the most complex issues in international diplomacy. Beijing considers Taiwan a breakaway province that must eventually reunify with the mainland. The government in Taipei operates as a self-governing democracy with its own military, political system, and international economic relationships. The United States maintains a policy known as strategic ambiguity, recognizing Beijing diplomatically while also maintaining strong, unofficial ties with Taiwan. This delicate balance has preserved stability for decades. But tensions have increased in recent years. China has conducted large-scale military exercises around Taiwan, involving naval vessels, fighter aircraft, and missile forces. These operations are often framed by Beijing as demonstrations of sovereignty. At the same time, American naval forces regularly conduct patrols through the Taiwan Strait, emphasizing the principle of freedom of navigation in international waters. For military planners, the region carries enormous strategic importance. Taiwan is a major hub in the global semiconductor industry, home to companies such as Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which produces advanced microchips used in everything from smartphones to military systems. Control over this technology supply chain could have global economic implications. But Taiwan is not the only contested region in Asia. Farther south lies the South China Sea, a vast maritime area crossed by some of the world's busiest shipping routes. Several countries, including China, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei, maintain competing territorial claims in these waters. Over the past decade, China has constructed artificial islands on several reefs and shoals in the region. Some of these installations now contain airstrips, radar facilities, and defensive missile systems. These developments have raised concerns among neighboring states and international observers. The United States and its allies frequently conduct naval operations in the region to challenge what they consider excessive maritime claims. These missions, often referred to as freedom of navigation operations, bring warships from multiple nations into close proximity. Although such encounters are usually managed carefully, the possibility of miscalculation always exists. Another region where tensions remain persistent is the Korean Peninsula. The division between North Korea and South Korea dates back to the aftermath of the Korean War, which ended in 1953 without a formal peace treaty. Today, the border between the two countries remains one of the most heavily fortified in the world. North Korea continues to develop ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons, conducting periodic tests that draw international attention. Some of these missiles have demonstrated the potential range to reach parts of the United States and its allies in the Pacific. In response, the United States maintains significant military forces in South Korea and conducts joint exercises with South Korean armed forces. These drills are intended to strengthen readiness and deterrence. But from Pyongyang's perspective, such exercises are often interpreted as preparation for potential conflict. This cycle of action and reaction has continued for decades. Across Asia, these flashpoints share several common characteristics. Powerful militaries operate in close proximity. Strategic interests overlap. and the consequences of escalation could extend far beyond regional borders. Yet the most volatile flashpoints are not limited to Asia. In Europe and the Middle East, other rivalries are unfolding, rivalries that could also influence the course of global security. While Asia contains several of the world's most closely watched geopolitical tensions, other regions are experiencing equally significant rivalries. One of the most consequential is unfolding in Eastern Europe. Since 2022, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has fundamentally reshaped the security landscape of the continent. What began as a regional conflict has gradually taken on wider strategic implications. The government of Ukraine receives military and economic support from a coalition of Western countries led by the United States and members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Advanced artillery systems, air defense platforms, armored vehicles, and intelligence support have strengthened Ukraine's ability to defend its territory. From Moscow's perspective, however, this support represents direct involvement by NATO in a conflict near Russian borders. As a result, relations between Russia and NATO have reached their most strained level in decades. NATO has responded by deploying additional troops, aircraft, and defensive systems across Eastern Europe, particularly in countries such as Poland and the Baltic states. These deployments are intended as deterrence measures, reinforcing the alliance's commitment to collective defense under Article 5 of the NATO treaty. At the same time, Russian military doctrine continues to emphasize the role of strategic nuclear forces as a deterrent against large-scale confrontation with NATO. This mutual deterrence has so far prevented direct conflict between the alliance and Russia. But the presence of powerful militaries operating near active battlefields increases the importance of careful crisis management. Another major flashpoint exists in the Middle East, where tensions between Iran and Israel have been building for years. The rivalry between these two states is complex, involving ideological differences, regional influence, and concerns about nuclear capability. Israel has long expressed concern about Iran's nuclear program, while Iranian leaders view Israel and its allies as strategic adversaries in the region. Rather than direct large-scale war, much of this confrontation has occurred through indirect means. Proxy conflicts have emerged in several countries across the Middle East, where regional groups aligned with one side or the other have become involved in local conflicts. Cyber operations, targeted strikes, and intelligence activities have also become part of this ongoing shadow conflict. Because both Iran and Israel possess advanced military capabilities, and because several major global powers maintain strategic interests in the region, any escalation could quickly draw international attention. But modern flashpoints are no longer confined to physical battlefields. Another growing arena of strategic competition exists in cyberspace. Over the past decade, governments around the world have reported increasingly sophisticated cyber operations targeting critical infrastructure. These attacks can involve electrical grids, transportation networks, financial systems, or communication platforms. Unlike traditional warfare, cyber operations often occur quietly. The organizations responsible may never publicly claim responsibility. The attacks themselves may remain hidden from public view for months or even years. Yet their potential impact is enormous. A successful cyber attack could disrupt power systems, disable financial transactions, or interfere with emergency services in major cities. For this reason, many defense analysts now consider cyber warfare to be one of the defining features of modern strategic competition. Across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, these flashpoints reveal a broader pattern. Regional disputes are increasingly linked to global rivalries. Major powers are involved, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, in conflicts far from their own borders. And in an interconnected world, events in one region can rapidly influence security dynamics in another. Understanding how these rivalries might evolve requires examining another critical factor: the global balance of military power. Understanding the risks of global conflict requires looking beyond flashpoints and examining the capabilities of the forces involved. Military power in the modern world is not defined by a single army or navy. It is shaped by alliances, logistics, technology, and global reach. No military alliance illustrates this more clearly than the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Formed in 1949, NATO was originally created as a collective defense pact between North American and European countries. Its founding principle was simple: an attack against one member would be treated as an attack against all. During the Cold War, NATO served as the primary military counterbalance to the Soviet Union. Today, decades after that rivalry ended, the alliance remains one of the most powerful military coalitions in history. At the center of NATO's military capability is the United States. The United States maintains the largest and most technologically advanced military force in the world. Its defense budget alone exceeds that of many other major powers combined. But numbers alone do not define American military strength. What makes the United States unique is its ability to project power across the globe. One of the clearest examples of this capability is the Aircraft Carrier Strike Group. The U.S. Navy operates several nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, each capable of launching dozens of advanced fighter aircraft. These floating air bases travel with escort ships, submarines, and logistical support vessels, forming highly mobile naval task forces. When deployed, a single carrier strike group can influence military events across an entire region. American forces also maintain a vast network of overseas bases. From Europe to the Pacific, U.S. troops are stationed in dozens of allied countries. In Germany, Japan, and South Korea, major bases serve as forward positions for air power, logistics, and rapid deployment. These installations allow the United States and its allies to respond quickly to emerging crises. But NATO is far more than a single country. European members contribute substantial military capabilities of their own. Countries such as the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Poland operate advanced air forces, armor divisions, and naval fleets. Several NATO members also possess nuclear weapons. Both the United Kingdom and France maintain independent nuclear deterrent forces, including submarine-based ballistic missiles capable of launching from the world's oceans. These weapons are designed not for battlefield use, but for strategic deterrence. The concept that the threat of overwhelming retaliation discourages potential adversaries from initiating conflict. Technology is another defining element of NATO's military advantage. Western defense industries have produced some of the most advanced aircraft and surveillance systems ever built. Stealth fighters such as the F-35 Lightning II are designed to evade radar detection while conducting precision strikes. Airborne early warning aircraft monitor vast areas of airspace, providing real-time intelligence to commanders on the ground and at sea. Satellite networks operated by the United States and its allies provide global navigation, communications, and reconnaissance capabilities that modern militaries rely upon every day. In recent years, NATO has also expanded its focus beyond traditional battlefields. Cyber defense units now play a critical role in protecting military and civilian infrastructure from digital attacks. Space-based assets have become essential for missile warning systems and battlefield awareness. The alliance has even begun integrating artificial intelligence technologies into military planning and data analysis. Despite these advantages, Western military planners are increasingly aware that global power balances are shifting. Other nations are rapidly developing capabilities designed specifically to challenge NATO's traditional strengths. Missile systems capable of targeting aircraft carriers, anti-satellite weapons that could disrupt communications, advanced air defense networks designed to limit Western air superiority. The era when one alliance held overwhelming technological advantage is gradually evolving into something more complex. And to understand that shift fully, it is necessary to examine the capabilities of the powers increasingly challenging Western dominance. While the Western Alliance maintains enormous military capability, the global balance of power is being reshaped by countries that are rapidly modernizing their armed forces. Two nations stand at the center of this shift: China and Russia. Each has developed strategies designed to challenge the traditional military advantages of the United States and its allies. China's transformation has been particularly dramatic. Over the past 2 decades, the People's Liberation Army has undergone one of the largest modernization efforts in modern military history. Massive investments in shipbuilding, missile technology, cyber warfare, and space systems have reshaped China's military posture. The Chinese Navy, officially the People's Liberation Army Navy, is now the largest naval force in the world by number of vessels. New destroyers, amphibious assault ships, and aircraft carriers have expanded China's ability to operate far beyond its coastline. Much of this expansion is focused on the Indo-Pacific. Chinese military planners emphasize what analysts often call anti-access and area denial strategies, systems designed to prevent foreign forces from operating near Chinese territory. These systems include advanced surface-to-air missiles, long-range anti-ship missiles, and sophisticated radar networks capable of tracking targets across vast distances. Among the most widely discussed weapons are ballistic missiles specifically designed to target large naval vessels. Missiles such as the DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missile are intended to threaten aircraft carriers operating in the Western Pacific, potentially complicating the ability of outside powers to intervene in regional conflicts. At the same time, China has expanded its presence in space and cyberspace. Military satellites provide navigation and targeting data for modern weapon systems. Cyber units conduct intelligence operations that focus on both military and industrial technology. Artificial intelligence research is also becoming a priority, with Chinese defense planners exploring how autonomous systems could influence future battlefields. Meanwhile, Russia has pursued a different, but equally significant approach. Although Russia's conventional military budget is smaller than that of the United States or China, its strategy places heavy emphasis on advanced missile technology and nuclear deterrence. Russia possesses one of the world's largest nuclear arsenals, inherited largely from the Soviet Union. These weapons remain central to Russian military doctrine. But in recent years, Moscow has also focused on new delivery systems designed to evade missile defenses. One example is the Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle, which can travel at extremely high speeds while maneuvering unpredictably during flight. Another system, the KH-47M2 Kinzhal hypersonic missile, is capable of being launched from aircraft and striking targets at long distances. Because hypersonic weapons move faster than traditional missiles and can change direction during flight, they're far more difficult for defensive systems to intercept. Beyond missile technology, Russia has also invested heavily in electronic warfare and air defense systems. Platforms such as the S-400 air defense system are designed to protect large areas of airspace by tracking and engaging multiple aircraft simultaneously. These systems have been deployed in several strategic regions, forming layered defensive networks around key military installations. Another major feature of modern warfare is the rapid expansion of unmanned systems. Drones are now used for reconnaissance, targeting, and direct combat operations. In recent conflicts, relatively inexpensive unmanned aircraft have demonstrated the ability to challenge much larger and more expensive military platforms. Artificial intelligence and automation are expected to play an even larger role in future warfare. Autonomous drones, robotic vehicles, and AI-assisted targeting systems are already being tested by several countries. The integration of these technologies could transform how wars are fought in the decades ahead. Taken together, these developments illustrate a broader shift. The modern military balance is no longer defined solely by the number of soldiers or tanks a country possesses. It is shaped by networks of satellites, cyber capabilities, advanced missiles, and technological innovation. And in a world where multiple powers possess powerful military capabilities, the consequences of conflict would extend far beyond the battlefield. Which leads to the next question. If these rivalries were to escalate, what would the global consequences look like? Modern global conflict would not begin only on traditional battlefields. It would unfold across economies, infrastructure networks, and supply chains that connect nearly every nation on Earth. The world today is far more interconnected than it was during the Cold War. International trade links manufacturing centers, financial markets, transportation systems, and digital infrastructure into a single global network. If major powers were drawn into large-scale conflict, that network could fracture with extraordinary speed. One of the first effects would likely appear in global trade. Roughly 90% of international commerce travels by sea. Major maritime routes pass through critical choke points such as the South China Sea, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Suez Canal. These narrow waterways carry enormous volumes of oil, manufactured goods, and raw materials between continents. If naval forces were to clash in any of these regions, commercial shipping could be disrupted almost immediately. Insurance costs for cargo vessels would rise sharply. Shipping companies might suspend operations in high-risk areas. Ports around the world would begin experiencing delays and shortages. Even a limited disruption could ripple through global supply chains. One of the most sensitive sectors would be semiconductor production. The island of Taiwan plays a central role in manufacturing advanced microchips used in electronics, automobiles, telecommunications equipment, and military systems. Companies like Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company produce a significant portion of the world's most advanced processors. A major disruption to Taiwan's semiconductor industry could slow manufacturing across multiple industries worldwide. Factories producing smartphones, computers, vehicles, and industrial machinery rely on these components. Without them, production lines could halt within weeks. Energy markets would also face immediate pressure. Large portions of the world's oil supply pass through the Strait of Hormuz, located between Iran and Oman. If tensions in the Middle East escalated into a wider conflict, tanker traffic through this narrow passage could become vulnerable to attack or blockade. Such a disruption would affect fuel prices across global markets. Energy shortages could quickly spread through transportation systems, electricity generation, and industrial production. Financial markets would also react rapidly to the outbreak of major conflict. Global investors typically respond to geopolitical crises by moving capital into safer assets. Large-scale instability could trigger dramatic swings in stock markets, currency values, and commodity prices. Banks and governments would likely intervene to stabilize financial systems. But even with intervention, economic uncertainty could spread quickly. At the same time, cyber warfare could target the infrastructure that supports modern economies. Over the past decade, cyber operations have already demonstrated their ability to disrupt critical systems. Electrical grids, pipelines, hospitals, and transportation networks have all been targeted in various incidents attributed to state-sponsored actors. In a major international crisis, these attacks could intensify. Power outages, communication failures, and transportation disruptions could affect major cities simultaneously. Unlike traditional warfare, cyber attacks can cross borders instantly. A single digital operation could disrupt systems thousands of kilometers away from any physical battlefield. Taken together, these factors reveal a sobering reality. In a highly interconnected world, large-scale conflict between major powers would not remain confined to military front lines. Its effects would spread rapidly through the economic and technological systems that support modern civilization. And beyond economic disruption lies an even more serious concern: the human and strategic consequences of escalation in a world where nuclear weapons still exist. Beyond the economic and infrastructural consequences, modern conflict carries the looming specter of nuclear escalation. Nuclear weapons remain the ultimate tool of strategic deterrence, designed to prevent large-scale wars through the promise of overwhelming retaliation. Yet the same weapons that deter conflict also make any miscalculation potentially catastrophic. The United States, Russia, and China collectively maintain thousands of nuclear warheads deployed across land, air, and sea. Submarine-launched ballistic missiles, intercontinental missiles, and strategic bombers form a layered network of delivery systems designed to ensure survivability in the event of an attack. This strategic balance, often referred to as mutual assured destruction, has historically prevented direct conflict between nuclear powers. Yet the risks of escalation remain. In regional crises, misunderstandings or miscalculations could trigger nuclear alerts. A false warning or technical malfunction might provoke a disproportionate response, especially when automated systems are involved. Even without nuclear strikes, global human consequences of large-scale conflict would be profound. Millions of people could be displaced by war, creating refugee crises that span continents. In Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, populations near flashpoints could face immediate threats to life and safety. Emergency infrastructure could be overwhelmed, leading to shortages of food, water, and medical supplies. Energy scarcity could exacerbate humanitarian challenges. Disruptions to oil, gas, and electricity supplies would affect hospitals, transportation, and essential services. Populations far from the battlefield could experience cascading effects, from fuel shortages to skyrocketing prices for basic goods. Cyber warfare could intensify human vulnerability. Modern societies rely on digital networks for banking, communication, transportation, and healthcare. Widespread disruption could paralyze cities, leaving millions without access to critical services. Global health systems could face immense pressure. Hospitals overwhelmed with casualties from conflict, coupled with infrastructure failures, could struggle to provide care. The psychological impact of such crises cannot be underestimated. Fear, uncertainty, and mistrust could influence political decisions, potentially amplifying tensions. Finally, environmental consequences must be considered. Modern conventional warfare can devastate urban and rural areas alike. Large-scale strikes could contaminate land, water, and air, leaving long-term damage to ecosystems and agricultural systems. The combination of nuclear risk, human displacement, and environmental disruption illustrates the high stakes of contemporary military escalation. Even a conflict confined to one region could ripple across the globe. Modern power struggles are not abstract. They're deeply intertwined with the survival of nations, the stability of economies, and the safety of populations. And yet, despite these risks, history demonstrates that conflict is not inevitable. Diplomacy, strategic foresight, and careful management of tensions can still prevent global catastrophe. Which leads us to the final part of our story, a reflection on what it takes to maintain peace in an age of unprecedented global risk. Throughout history, humanity has faced the specter of global war. From the trenches of World War I to the nuclear standoff of the Cold War, each era has tested the limits of diplomacy, strategy, and restraint. Today, the world stands at another critical juncture. Military technologies are faster, deadlier, and more interconnected than ever before. Conflicts in one region can ripple across continents through trade, cyberspace, and global supply chains. Strategic decisions made in the halls of power can affect billions of lives in an instant. Yet the existence of powerful militaries, advanced weapons, and complex alliances does not make war inevitable. It also creates an opportunity for restraint. Nuclear deterrence, economic interdependence, and diplomatic engagement remain tools that can prevent escalation, even in the most tense confrontations. History has shown that the consequences of miscalculation are rarely reversible. Every crisis avoided, every dialogue maintained, and every compromise achieved strengthens the fragile balance that keeps global war at bay. As the world watches China maneuver in the Pacific, Russia patrol Eastern European skies, and alliances across continents tighten, one truth remains clear. The capacity for destruction is immense, but so too is humanity's ability to prevent catastrophe. Peace is not merely the absence of war. It is the product of foresight, courage, and the constant effort to understand the stakes of our shared world. In this delicate balance, every decision matters, and every moment offers the chance to choose survival over conflict.